Hello, and welcome back to Me Screaming Into the Void. If you haven't read the title yet and just saw my face and the red background, fitting to today's beautiful subject, it's slasher season, and I have a double feature set up for you that pretty much tears apart and muses over this genre that has been whipped beyond any recognition, I think, by now, and it is also difficult to find any movies that fit the slasher genre that are still inspiring or make you go like, oh, I haven't seen that before, except maybe some will argue Terrifier. However, I think that goes more into gore territory and splatter than slasher per se. Yes, I know, I'm aware it is a slasher. I just don't like the franchise. I'm more of a Chucky and Nightmare on Elm Street person myself. Yes, Ghostface is my favorite slasher of all. We can argue all day long about what slasher, where, why, and who. There is the Halloweenies out there, there is the Friday 13 people, and that's why I chose as this double feature none of those franchises, but two movies that completely take the genre apart. As we all know, the slasher genre has a split personality. Half of it is primal terror and the other half is sheer performance art. Today we are talking about In a Violent Nature and Behind the Mask that prove that both of these statements are true. Both use the classic slasher setup but take the murder in opposite directions. In a Violent Nature builds this quiet lurking threat in the woods, while Behind the Mask turns killing into this planned theatrical production. Welcome to slasher season. First we'll delve into Violent Nature, then we pivot into Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Both films embody the slasher genre core, but each goes a very different route. In a Violent Nature is first up. It's like Friday the 13th, but told by a tree in the woods. The director, Chris Nash, films in Academy ratio. There is no music, hardly any talking, and lots of lengthy shots, pulling the viewers into the forest. He calls it a test of patience, which I completely agree with. I've heard from a lot of people that have watched this movie that they found it quote unquote kind of boring. I think it hits a spot for people who like violence but also like to watch nature documentaries. It is a test of patience, but it pays off with a series of such brutal kills. You're kind of rewarded for it. Much of what makes the film work is all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it that you don't see. They had to reshoot most of the movie in a new location, a new director of photography, and a new actor after the first one had a medical emergency. Ree Barrett took over and gave Johnny a unique presence using his size and slow, careful movements to make the character feel real. The way Johnny walks, his posture matters a lot. When a whole movie is about nothing else than watching this figure move through the woods, the performance needs to be on point for the movie to feel right. This time I will give you all the spoilers just because both movies are very tropey. If you don't want any spoilers, you can first watch the movies and then come back to this video. However, I can tell you already now that the setup from both movies and the ending of both movies goes exactly as planned in a slasher. You have the resurrection of a slasher or the birth of a slasher monster, the teens or the group of friends that are either in the woods or at school, the stalking from the monster himself that is going after this group of friends, and the ending is always the same. You have a lot of killing. The slasher is kind of killed, not really, or disappears into the woods and is put to sleep and resurrects again. That is basically the skeleton of each slasher that has ever been mentioned. And these movies don't go into more depth than that. So if you're happy to know what kind of happens, just so that we can take apart both movies, then you can come along for the ride. And otherwise, if you haven't watched the movies yet, go watch them, come back. So for this one, in a remote forest in Ontario, a group of friends discovers a locket dangling from a wreckage of a fire tower. Troy pockets it because, of course, no slasher movie has ever respected cursed jewelry. And Johnny, a bullied local who fell to his death years ago, is resurrected and claws his his way out of the ground when the locket is taken. Later on, the group of friends share Johnny's tale around a campfire, fulfilling the slasher ritual of letting us know his backstory. After that, Johnny stalks the group of friends. Brody is drowned in the lake in a single shot from far away, and that is just such a fantastic scene. The camera never leaves the spot, and you just see how Johnny just disappears underwater for an uncanny amount of time. Already there, you are sure that this is more of a supernatural being than anything else, and both movies mirror that in different ways. And here, he disappears into the water. And you just watch this lake while she's like in the water enjoying herself. And you know he's coming. You know he's there. But you can't see anything. There are no bubbles telling you that he is approaching her or anything. She just at some point disappears. Then we turn to Aurora's dockside yoga into that now infamous hook to the head, dragged through the bowels cliff toss. If you watched the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That was one of the most wonderful special effects that I've ever seen. The close-ups are absolutely amazing. The realism of the effects makes it so much more fun to watch. The special effects are done by Steven Kostanski. For those who recognize the name, yes, he is the same Toronto-based special effects artist who did the special effects for Psycho Gorman. I love that movie. The yoga scene definitely did it for me, and I think it stayed in everyone's memory for a long time. The way that it's done is he puts his hand through her bowels, he has a hook, then he puts the hook in her head and drags her head, snapping her neck through the bowels again, pulling her entire head with it. And it is one of the best kills I've seen in a long time when it comes to slasher lore. Johnny picks off Troy and Evan in the woods, not before that so brought me out of it. Evan and Troy are talking about how they need to go, and they're looking for the car keys, and the car keys are on the ground, and there is a tiny little car on those keys. And Johnny sits down while they're discussing behind him, and he starts toying with the keys. Like, he's in no rush to kill these teens. He's pretty sure he's gonna get to all of them. And he finally does. At the ranger station, it's revealed that the locket keeps Johnny at rest. The ranger, of course, also fails to intervene and ends up in another very graphic scene where he's being split into half by a log splitter. Also there, no camera pans, just him on that log splitter and the camera just not budging. By dawn, Chris, who seems to be the final girl of the story, drags herself onto a lonely road and flags down a pickup. We see that the locket that she had put on a canister in the middle of the forest is gone, which means that Johnny is put to rest for now. But obviously we are getting a sequel because it has been announced for a while now, and that will hopefully promise even more long shots of terrifying violence. Why this movie works and gets under your skin, the fact that there is no score, no safety net, that camera always lingers on each kill, you having to digest the whole thing. There is no warning cues, there is just sounds of flies, wind, footsteps, bones breaking, and metal scraping. This sound guys did their very best. I was completely immersed in this movie. It's almost like watching a nature documentary until it turns into this bloody gore fest. The camera always follows Johnny, not the kids, except in the end when it follows the final girl. The film uses long, unbroken shots like those in art house movies for the kill scenes, making violence feel calm and unsettling. The landscape itself also adds to the mythology. The dense trees and fading light makes the forest feel like a main character itself, with Johnny as its most violent part. The best kill is definitely the yoga girl. There is just no denying it. Hook, guts, and gravity. The most unhinged moment for me was definitely the long-drawn decapitation. The movie avoids jump scares, instead focuses on slow themes of unforgiving violence and nature itself. Let's get to the more funner one, and also I would say that you watch it in this order. I also watched it like that, and I feel like it's the best way to do it. I don't know how you watch your stuff, but if I'm gonna watch a nature documentary about orcas that will make me very sad afterwards. I need a little bit of a palate cleanser, and I feel like Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon does exactly that. It premiered at festivals, underperformed. However, since then, it has slowly built a cult status. It's directed by Scott Glosserman and co-written by David G. Steve. It's shot mostly in a mockumentary style before shifting into complete classic slasher. It stars Nathan Basil as Leslie, Angela Goethals as Taylor Gentry, the documentarian, Robert Englund as Doc Halloran, the nemesis, Zelda Rubinstein as Mrs. Collingwood in her final film role as a librarian. This movie is for people who already know what a slasher is in horror and are here for the fun little behind the scenes and Easter eggs, not really for the ones who are just starting out. Or maybe it is also for the ones who are just starting out, because it kind of explains everything and maybe you will appreciate your following slashers a little more. The plot here is that Leslie Vernon lives in a small town in Glen Echo and wants to join the ranks of famous boogeymen like Jason, Freddy, and Michael. In this universe, the killers are real, not just movie characters, and Leslie looks up to them as legends. It's even mentioned the whole time, like in the beginning, the documentarian, she goes around and says, that is where the killer seems to kill people in his sleep. This is where the guy, Michael, stalks his babysitter. Leslie talks the documentarian, Taylor Gentry, and her crew into filming his career launch. It is where the film becomes weirdly adorable. Leslie is charming, enthusiastic, and obviously proud of his craft. He walks them through training and preparation, cardio, planning, escape routes, and tricks to make it look like he's teleporting when he's really just running off camera. He picks Kelly Curtis, catch that? Curtis? A seemingly virginal diner waitress as his survivor girl, which in our terms is the final girl. He explains the red herring and myth building. He manipulates Kelly into looking up old newspaper clippings with Mrs. Collingwood, the librarian, setting her up as a doomed side character. The first real break in the movie comes at the library when Kelly finds that newspaper clipping and asks the librarian for information. Leslie, dressed in torn overalls and a mask, is about to kill Miss Collingwood when Doc Halloran bursts in, guns blazing, shouting that it ends here. He is Leslie's Ahab, the hero obsessed with stopping the villain, giving us very heavy Doc Loomis from Halloween vibes. From there, Taylor tries to warn Kelly, but instead runs into Halloran, who tells her that Leslie's real name is Leslie Mancuso from Reno. And that he's basically manufactured his own legend. Leslie is obviously very furious that she was attempting to interfere with his final girl and admits that he lied about the backstory, but doubles down on the plan. Everything comes to a final crescendo at the old Vernon farmhouse, the kind of place where every town claims as a teen party spot. You know which ones we mean. Leslie has very obviously set it up. The windows are bolted shut, power boxes are rerouted, flashlight batteries are swapped for dead ones. Tree branches are pre-cut so anyone trying to climb out will fall. He explains all of this to Taylor and the crew ahead of time, almost like a sinister safety briefing. When the teens arrive, Leslie starts his killing spree. Two stoners near the shed, one gets his head split with a sickle and the other has his heart yanked out. This is the moment where Taylor finally fully flips, which I'm like, this is the moment? Really? You didn't think that, in the beginning of your documentary? No? Okay. She can't keep filming. So she runs in to warn the group and finds Kelly doing the deed. So the virgin archetype collapses in real time in front of her eyes. Then Taylor realizes she was always meant to be the final girl. Leslie included her, Doug, and Todd in his plan from the very beginning. Kelly was just a decoy. From here, the movie switches modes. The visual shift goes into cinematic mode, the tone shifts from goofy mockumentary to straight up slasher. We get the classic beats. Kelly falls to her death trying to escape the booby-trapped window. Doc Halloran confronts Leslie in the barn and gets stabbed. Finally, Taylor embraces her survival girl role and kills Leslie by crushing his head in an apple grinder. When I had seen that apple grinder the first time, I was like, this is gonna have a very significant role, I hope. And it did. So she crushes his head in an apple grinder in the old orchard building and then burns the barn down, just to be safe. Halloran quietly says Leslie was just a man. But when the credits roll at a morgue, we see Leslie's burnt body rising again, hinting at a sequel that sadly never happened. However, it's still in true slasher fashion. The legend lives on. Why this movie rules beyond it just being a gimmick? Slasher is shown as labor, not as a magic trick. Leslie doesn't think of killing as fate, he treats it like a project. He keeps track of his fitness, sabotage, timing, and how the victims think. The movie explains what we usually call movie logic, the killer always being one step ahead, and shows the work that goes into it. The movie is meta, however also analytical. While Scream gives you the quick jokes and references, Behind the Mask takes apart the slasher tropes in detail, almost like a class on how the slasher movies work. The survival girl, the virginous final girl, the Ahab, which is basically Dr. Loomis from Halloween, it doesn't just mention these ideas, the whole plot is built to show how they play out. Switching from documentary style to the classic slasher isn't just a nice trick. It marks the moment when the characters go from watching violence to being part of the violence. Plus, there is the whole casting as a meta text. We have Robert Englund playing the Ahab that evokes all the authority of his slasher horror past. We have Zelda Rubinstein, famous from Poltergeist, delivering the urban legend speech with her iconic voice. Kane Hodder, who plays Jason Voorhees in multiple Friday the 13th movies, who shows up in the very beginning at 1428 Elm Street, the address from A Nightmare on Elm Street. I love that he's literally just shown for a couple of seconds being like, no comment, and just walks away. The movie takes place in horror history, not just referencing it. And of course, the plethora of horror references. We have the puzzle box from Hellraiser, Doc Halloran's wardrobe, making him look like Doc Loomis himself. Leslie works so well because Nathan Basil plays Leslie with this theater kid energy. He's fun, he's earnest, and weirdly vulnerable at some points. He wants to be seen, he wants to be remembered, and he wants to be part of the canon. He builds his identity from horror movies, just like some people build their personalities from fandoms. The scariest part is how reasonable he sounds every time he's trying to explain something. The best kill for me was definitely the second stoner who bumps into Leslie and Leslie knocks him down, drives a post hole digger into his chest and tears out his heart. And the most unhinged moment for me was the whole premise is unhinged. Why would anyone follow a serial killer and document his life's work is just beyond me. I'm just saying, if it were me, I would do my very best not to even be in the vicinity of him. In fact, I would move town or state or country just to be safe. Behind the Mask is the movie to show anyone who thinks slashers are dumb. It proves you can enjoy the tropes, poke fun at them, break them down, and still deliver a great bloody slasher by the end. So these are the two sides of the knife. When you watch In a Violent Nature and Behind the Mask, together you get a double feature that shows how slashers work, both inside and out. In a Violent Nature strips away the script. Behind the Mask reads the script out loud. One observes violence as an ecosystem, the other choreographed it as theater. Johnny is unknowable, Leslie desperately wants to be known. Both movies bring a fresh wind in this genre in different ways. Nash boils the genre down to its basics: a body moving through space, cause and effect, action and consequence. Glosserman rebuilds the genre into a statement about rules, archetypes, and the stories we tell to explain why bad things happen. Somewhere between these two approaches, between the quiet crunch of a boot in the moss and a killer happily explaining his process, the genre stays alive. Both remind us why the slashers will never die. Whether the woods are whispering or the killer is vlogging, somebody's getting axed. I hope you enjoyed this double feature. I had a lot of fun talking about these two movies and rewatching these two movies just because I had planned on doing that for a while now. I feel like November was the perfect month to do so. Also because I think it's hunting season. Is it hunting season? It is hunting season, and I felt like even though it's on the nose, it fits perfectly. Slashers are hunters as well. They just don't hunt animals, they hunt humans, which in my book is better. So this was me screaming into the void. Thank you for joining me out there and floating with me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!